The keyboard layout you use every day was designed for machines that no longer exist. Not for computers, not for software, not for electricity. It was built to solve a mechanical problem inside early typewriters. That problem disappeared more than a century ago. And yet, the layout stayed. You didn't choose it. Before typing, writing wasn't just slow. It was intimate. Handwriting carried identity, personality, status. Two people could write the same words and produce completely different artifacts. Ink pressure varied. Spacing changed. Letters leaned, drifted, collapsed. Mistakes stayed visible. Documents reflected the individual who made them. A contract written by one person did not look like a contract written by another. Uniformity was not expected. It was not valued. In many cases, variation was useful. It helped identify authorship. It carried authority. The idea that writing should look the same everywhere, for everyone, had not yet entered the world. That expectation would have to be invented. As governments grew, as businesses expanded, as bureaucracies formed, writing began to change. Suddenly, speed mattered. Volume mattered. Legibility mattered. Human hands struggled to keep up, and this pressure did not come from culture. It came from logistics. Writing needed to scale. When early typewriters appeared in the mid-19th century, they were not interfaces. They were machines. Heavy, mechanical, industrial. Cast iron bodies, exposed levers, springs under tension. They were closer to printing presses than to anything we would recognize as personal. They weren't portable. They weren't personal. They sat heavy on desks, bolted down. Typing wasn't quiet work. It was mechanical labor. Every keystroke produced sound, impact, resistance. Every word announced itself. Writing became physical. Each sentence was a sequence of physical impacts. Metal striking ink ribbon, ink striking paper. A keystroke wasn't a signal, it was force. The machine did not respond to intention. It responded to pressure, to speed, to timing. And that distinction would matter. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Slow typists didn't notice anything unusual. The machines worked. The letters appeared. But as people practiced, as speed increased, as confidence grew, a problem emerged. The faster you typed, the worse the machine behaved. This was the cruel irony. Skill didn't improve performance. It destroyed it. Certain letter combinations appeared constantly in English. Th, er, set, on, he. Pressed quickly, one after another, their metal arms rose along neighboring paths. They collided, they jammed, they locked together. The better the operator, the more fragile the system became. To the user, this felt like failure. Not an edge case, not a technical detail. A jammed machine feels broken, even if it technically still works. And broken machines don't spread. Adoption depends on trust. At this point, there is no QWERTY. There is only frustration. And there are many competing ideas. Early keyboards experimented constantly. Alphabetical layouts, radial layouts, symmetrical layouts, layouts optimized for visual balance. Nothing was fixed yet. The keyboard was still negotiable. Some designs prioritized learning speed. Others prioritized symmetry. Some tried to mirror handwriting frequency. Others tried to minimize finger movement. None of them solved the mechanical problem reliably, and reliability mattered more than elegance. And then there is a person, Christopher Latham Sholes, not a computer scientist, not even primarily an engineer. He was a printer, a newspaper editor, someone obsessed with one idea, making written text reproducible at scale. Sholes lived in a world of print, of presses, of deadlines. He understood one thing deeply. If a machine fails in front of a user, it doesn't matter why. It feels broken, and broken machines don't survive. Sholes didn't work alone. Carlos Glidden, James Densmore, partners, investors, advocates. They were not debating philosophy. They were chasing adoption. A machine that jams kills confidence. The question was not, how do we make typing faster? The question was, how do we stop the machine from embarrassing its user? That reframing changed everything. The key insight wasn't about speed, it was about collision. Some letters were harmless, alone, but disastrous together. The problem wasn't language, it was mechanics. So Sholes did something unintuitive. He separated common letter pairs, not to help the user, but to protect the machine. The layout that emerged was QWERTY, not optimized for humans, optimized for survival. Keys rearranged so their metal arms wouldn't rise next to each other. This wasn't linguistic elegance, it was mechanical compromise. QWERTY might have died there, but it didn't, because Sholes partnered with Remington, a firearms manufacturer, a company that understood mass production. When Remington backed the design, QWERTY gained distribution. And distribution is power. Once people learned QWERTY, the cost shifted, not to manufacturers, to humans. Learning a layout took time, practice, pain. Retraining meant lost productivity, lost wages, lost credibility. No company wanted to pay that price for a problem that no longer hurt. Technology improved. Type bars were redesigned. Mechanisms became smoother. Then electricity arrived. Electric typewriters don't jam the same way. The original constraint disappeared. And yet the layout stayed, because systems don't reset when their original problems disappear. They accumulate. When computers arrived, QWERTY came with them, not because it made sense, but because changing it didn't. Software inherited hardware habits. Typing classes taught QWERTY. Certification required QWERTY. Jobs expected QWERTY. The layout became invisible. QWERTY stopped being a solution. It became a constraint, a pattern preserved by cost, not by merit. On laptops, on phones, on glass screens, a 19th century decision embedded in 21st century devices. The mechanical reason is gone. The pattern remains. QWERTY no longer protects machines. Machines protect QWERTY. A solution outlived its problem, not because it was perfect, but because it was already there. And sometimes, what already exists is harder to remove than what never worked.